Hey guys, Chad Hoover, Kayak Bass Fishing, and welcome to FishUSA's Phases of Fishing. All right, guys, so we're going to jump right into it. But before we do, I got to thank the folks at Lake County, Florida, LakeBigBass.com for making this series possible. I came down here to get me a little early spring in February while the rest of the country is still frozen. So here we go. Let's jump right into it. So a lot of YouTubers like to do the video, the top 3 lures for this and the top 5 lures for that and the top, right? You can see 100 of them. And you know what? Those videos are great and they work really great for helping you get a little bit more dialed in. But this question pops up a lot, and I don't think anybody ever does or has done, or I've not been able to see it. If there is a great video about it, drop it in the comment section below. I'll go check it out, and I'll eat my words. But I want to tell you that I think one of the most overlooked lures for spring bass fishing that can bring you as much, if not more success than anything else in your arsenal, more so than a lot of times chatterbaits, more so a lot of times than soft plastics, more so than spinnerbaits, more so than crankbaits, is because this bait in a lot of cases can mimic every other bait out there. So I'm holding it over here so you can't see it, or maybe you already got a peek of it. If you did, you're one of those people that, you know, doesn't pay attention and you read to the end of the chapter ahead of time, or you read ahead of the teacher. But here's the thing. I'm not gonna do some fancy drum roll. Actually, yeah, let's do like a drum roll, please. Drum roll, please. And that lure is a swim jig. And it's not any kind of earth-shattering revelation that a swim jig is an effective bait. But I will say this. I think a lot of times the swim jig is underrated in its effectiveness, but it's also underrated in when you should start fishing it. I think that the person that asked the question, when should I start fishing a swim jig, is the person that doesn't understand you should never stop fishing a swim jig. I like a swim jig. And a lot of times a swim jig is so easy to fish and it is so effective that I almost don't talk about it enough, because I just assume that most people understand how effective a swim jig is. So the reason that I like this heart-shaped head, this structure bug style head, is it comes through vegetation nice and easy. It still has a football jig profile to it, so when it hits a log or a tree limb or something, it comes over it nice and easy. It's got a weed guard. It's got a nice skirt. And I'm just going to show you one little quick modification that I like to do to this bait. I like to hang the skirt upside down. I like to take a Yamamoto Seiko, and I like to cut the head off of it. Now, in my rebait concept, I always reuse baits. So this bait was already used as a swim jig, right? Or it was used on a multi-bait rig like this, and the nose was torn up. Or it was used for some other purpose. Once it's used and the nose is torn up and it doesn't work effectively for a Texas rig or something like that, then I cut it off and then I reuse it as a swim jig trailer. Now, I left the gap in here before I started the video because I want to show you this, right? I like to cut that off blunt at the front, even if it is a brand new Seiko, because I want to be able to push it forward. And when I push it forward, I want it to make that skirt flare out more. Now, if you saw this in the beginning of the video, you'll notice the skirt hung a little flatter. Now that I've pushed that bait up there, it really makes it bulge out a little more. That's going to create more bulk. It's going to create more pulse. And in the water, when I reel it, it doesn't lay down as flat. So it still has that broad profile that's going to imitate a bait fish, specifically a brim, pumpkin seed, you know, or other type of, not only a fish that bass likes to forage on, but it is a natural predator. Predates on the bass when they're fry or young. Predates on the eggs when the bass lays them in the bed. And so for me, when you can mimic something that is killing 2 birds with 1 stone, it's a great food source and it's a natural enemy of the bass. You're going to get a lot of bites pre-spawn, during the spawn, and post-spawn. This bait can be cast, really long cast, and can be just hold your rod tip up and wake it just below the surface. That's why I said yes, even in top water. I can throw this thing and skim it across the top of pads. If a fish bowls on it, I can drop my rod tip and let it fall to the bottom and yo-yo it. I can set it on top of a pad, and because it has a little more weight, when I drag it, when I jiggle it, you know, just a little bit, when I wiggle it, just a little bit. Anyway, that thing is gonna make that pad vibrate. When it makes that pad vibrate, it's gonna send out those vibration rings. It's gonna cue in that bass that it's there. And then a lot of times when I just take that thing, and maybe I can find a clip and cut to this, and I just drag it off the side of that pad, when it falls in the water, they're right there to hit it. That could be an aggression bite, that could be a reaction bite, that could be a territory defense bite, that could be a young buck bass establishing a perimeter, or it could be a big female feeding up, killing a natural enemy. And more importantly, it could just be her having a pugnacious nature that says, I don't like brim, so I'm gonna hit it. But more importantly, this bait also works really well for pitching. And the reason that I like this bait for pitching is I can grab the hook like so, okay? Now, I could take you out on the water and show this, but I'm actually gonna show it to you on the ground because I think it helps demonstrate the point a little better. And it's very difficult to get good underwater footage deep. And I wanna show you why I think most people fish this bait. For one, they don't fish it enough in the bottom of the water column, middle of the water column, and on top. They kind of just throw it out and reel it in. But this bait is so versatile. This is the number one reason I think this is your number one most overlooked go-to bait that has to be in your arsenal for spring. And so when you get ready to pitch this thing, you just go to an open spool and you just go underhand and swing the bait out. When it hits the water, I want you to look at that bait over by my tire, and I want you to watch my hands. And notice that if I barely move my hand, see how a little bit that moves? But if I raise my rod tip from 1 o'clock to straight over my head, you see how far that bait moved? A lot of times, especially off peak, those fish are not going to chase this bait on the bottom. You have crawfish around 54, 55 degrees that are starting to emerge out of the ground. So it's gonna emulate a crawfish. It's going to imitate a brim when you swim it. It's going to imitate both if you're hopping it and popping it off the bottom. But I love this bait because I can pitch it, I can flip it and drop it down into a hole. I can swim it, I can skip it. You can skip it, flip it, swim it. You can do pretty much anything out there. And the hop and pop it, if you throw it out there, we like to call this in the South stroking a jig, where you hop it up off the bottom and it goes up and it falls back down. When it hits the bottom, it kicks up some silt. It gets those basses' attention. And sometimes it's just a total annoyance to hop it, hop it, hop it, hop it, and they finally hit it out of frustration. But you can also swim it through the top of the water column and really get some great reaction bites. So the number one lure that I think you should have tied on in the late winter into spring, through the spawn and after the spawn, all the way through, and if you don't have it tied on, you are wrong, is a swim jig. This is a Strike King swim jig with a weed guard, a Zaco, and a 1/2 ounce. Can't go wrong, green, pumpkin, and brown. Yeah, man, I'm gonna end this video. I'm actually gonna go over here and make a cast real quick and show you how to reel it through the top of the pads, and then y'all smash that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel if you're new to the channel, and go ahead and go to FishUSA right now and order yourself some new swim jigs.